Sir Donald Bradman, widely regarded as one of the greatest cricketers of all time, was born on August 27, 1908 in Cootamundra, New South Wales, Australia. His early interest in cricket was evident, and he honed his skills playing with a makeshift bat and tennis balls. By the age of 12, he was already showcasing remarkable talent, earning a spot on his school team. Bradman's first-class debut came in 1927 for New South Wales, where he quickly made a name for himself with a stunning average that would set the standard for batsmen worldwide. His unique technique, characterized by a high backlift and quick footwork, allowed him to dominate bowlers. He made his Test debut for Australia against England in 1928 and soon became a key player in the national team. Throughout his career, Bradman amassed an extraordinary batting average of 99.94 in Test cricket, a record that remains unparalleled. His remarkable performances during the infamous Ashes series against England further solidified his legacy. Notably, he scored 334 runs in a single innings at Leeds in 1930, and his consistent run scoring made him a central figure in Australian cricket. During the 1930s, Bradman faced significant challenges, including the Great Depression and World War II. Despite these obstacles, he continued to excel, leading Australia to numerous victories and becoming a symbol of hope for many Australians. His ability to perform under pressure and adapt his game against various bowling styles contributed to his legendary status. Bradman's career was temporarily interrupted by the war, but he returned to cricket in 1945. His final Test match was played in 1948 against England at the Oval, where he scored a mere 28 runs, bringing his illustrious career to a close. Following his retirement, he became a successful cricket administrator and a respected figure in the sports community. Bradman was knighted in 1949 for his contributions to cricket and his services to Australian sport. Beyond cricket, he was known for his humility, sportsmanship, and dedication to the game. He also wrote several books on cricket and was involved in various charitable endeavors. Bradman passed away on February 25, 2001, at the age of 92, leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire cricketers and fans worldwide. His influence on the game, characterized by his unmatched skill and dedication, remains a benchmark for excellence in cricket. Bradman's impact on cricket extended beyond his statistics. He was a pioneer in popularizing the game in Australia and around the world. His intense rivalry with bowlers, particularly during the Ashes series, created some of the most memorable moments in cricket history. The sheer spectacle of his batting attracted crowds and elevated the sport's profile. In addition to his on-field achievements, Bradman was known for his tactical acumen. He often studied opponents meticulously, adapting his game to exploit their weaknesses. This strategic approach not only made him a formidable opponent, but also set a standard for future generations of cricketers. After retiring from international cricket, Bradman remained involved in the sport as a selector and administrator. His insights and experience greatly influenced Australian cricket's direction in the following decades. He was also an advocate for the development of young talent, emphasizing the importance of nurturing the next generation of cricketers. Outside of cricket, Bradman had a keen interest in various pursuits, including golf, and he was known for his love of literature. His writings on cricket provided valuable insights into the game's intricacies and philosophies, making them essential reading for enthusiasts and aspiring players alike. Bradman's legacy continues to be celebrated through various honors, including awards named after him and induction into halls of fame worldwide. His name is synonymous with excellence in cricket, and his life story remains a source of inspiration, illustrating the values of perseverance, dedication, and sportsmanship. Even years after his passing, Bradman's influence endures, with his batting average often cited in discussions about the greatest players in any sport. His story not only highlights an exceptional sporting career, but also reflects the spirit of a nation that rallied around him during both triumphs and trials. In cricketing folklore, he remains an icon, embodying the ideals of skill and grace that define the sport. In Test International, Matches Bradman scored 6,996 runs for Australia and set a record with his average of 99.94 runs per contest. He scored 19 centuries, 100 runs in a single innings, in Test matches against England between 1928 and 1948. On his first visit to England in 1930, he established a Test record, eventually broken, by scoring 334 runs in one innings. In 1934, also in England, he had an innings of 304 runs. In 1948, he was captain of the Australian team that was victorious in England for matches to none. He retired from first-class cricket in 1949 and was knighted in the same year. Bradman, as a youth, perfected his timing by hitting a golf ball against a water tank. He developed a quick eye, deft footwork, and an uncanny judgment of bowling, and also became a brilliant outfieldsman. He wrote a volume of reminiscences, Farewell to Cricket 1950, and a coaching manual, The Art of Cricket 1958. Australia's Ashes Tour of England in 1930 was led by the Victorian batsman Bill Woodfull. His captain's exemplary, teetotal style of living, Bradman 1990 560, suited Bradman. By sheer volume of runs, 974 at an average of 139.14, it was his greatest Test series and signaled beyond question his arrival as an exceptional player. He scored 1,000 first-class runs by the end of May and made 2,960 tour runs. Later, he recalled his 254 in the second Test at Lord's as, technically, the best innings of my life. Bradman 1950-36. The English cricket correspondent Neville Cardis wrote that, until today I had looked at Bradman's batting as a thing of promise. I have now seen signs of a glorious fulfillment. Rosenwater 1978, 107. Bradman's performance in the third Test at Headingley, Leeds, won him more fame. His 334 in his only innings was a Test record and included 105 before lunch on the first day, followed by 115 between lunch and tea. He remains the only batsman to score a triple century in one day of a Test match. Public adulation greeted his return to Australia. The mobs of well-wishers and autograph hunters at railway stations, hotels, and airports were to him both embarrassing and daunting. His batting dominance continued at home against the West Indies, 1930-31, and South Africa, 1931-32, with a personal best Test series average in the latter series of 201.50. Such feats brought pleasure and diversion from the grimness that afflicted many Australians during the Depression. Yet Bradman came close to retiring early from Test cricket. From a young age, he was preoccupied with financial security. He played essentially as an amateur and, despite receiving match fees, was acutely conscious of his lack of a paying profession outside the game. During 1931, he considered an attractive offer to play professional cricket in the English Lancashire League, but the Australian Board of Control for International Cricket intimated that this would probably end his Test career. He was, however, in demand from Australian news outlets as a writer and commentator. In October 1931, he signed a 2-year contract with a consortium comprising the Sydney Sun, managed by Robert Clyde Packer, radio station 2UE, and the menswear and sporting store F.J. Palmer and Son Limited. The 2UE broadcasts were successful, and Palmer proceeded to conduct a good trade in Bradman-endorsed items. However, his writing for the Sun breached board policy, prohibiting players from writing about a series unless journalism was already their sole occupation. At one point, he threatened not to play. The situation was saved by the Sun offering to release him from its component of the deal. The greater financial security he achieved enabled Bradman to marry Jessie Martha Menzies on April 30th, 1932 at St. Paul's Church of England, Burwood, Sydney. His fame was such that the church was besieged by hundreds of uninvited onlookers. The couple had known each other since early childhood, Jessie having boarded with the Bradmans when attending school in Bowral. That the marriage was close, loving, and mutually supportive was obvious to those who knew them. Bradman considered it the best partnership of my life. Bradman 1950-50. Bradman's performance in 1930 provoked the tactics employed by the austere and patrician Douglas Jardine when he captained England during the controversial 1932-33 series in Australia. Bradman's apparent discomfort playing short-pitch deliveries from the fast bowler Harold Larwood during the fifth test at the Oval in 1930 had caught the attention of some Englishmen. The resultant bodyline bowling, based on short-pitch fast bowling at a batsman's body, so as to restrict scoring and force catchable leg-side shots, was dangerous. "My constant dread," said George Hele, who umpired all tests in the series, "was that a batsman would be killed." Pollard 1995, 288. A devastating pace bowler of great accuracy, Larwood was willing to do his captain's bidding, but Jardine's tactics otherwise divided his own camp. Gubby Allen refused to bowl to a bodyline field, and privately described Jardine as being loathed more than any German who ever fought in any war, for 2002-116. The tour became increasingly bitter as Australian batsmen were regularly struck painful blows. Bradman struggled in early tour games against the visitors and missed the first test due to illness, probably exacerbated by stress arising from his clash with the board, intense public attention, and the malice associated with the English tactics. During the second test in Melbourne, spectators were shocked into silence by his first ball duck. They soon recovered when their hero scored 103 not out in the second innings, and Australia won comfortably. The atmosphere at the test that followed in Adelaide was particularly bitter. Sir Pelham Plum Warner, the English team manager and no friend of Jardine, was the recipient of Woodfull's famous barb that there are two teams out there. One is trying to play cricket, and the other is not, for 2002-185. This stinging rebuke was promptly relayed to the press, leading to inconclusive allegations as to the identity of the leaker. Many suspected the Australian opening batsman and professional journalist Jack Fingleton. Fingleton instead blamed Bradman, who steadfastly denied it then and later. The ethics and long-term viability of bodyline were highly doubtful, yet it succeeded in the immediate aim of curbing Bradman. His batting average for the series dipped to 56.57, still topping the Australian averages but modest by his standards. England reclaimed the Ashes 4-1. Bradman had by this midpoint in his Test career an established reputation as a disciplined, self-contained person. His fierce determination to win unsettled even as seasoned an observer as Cardis. Such focus was reflected in a demeanor that left opposing players intimidated by his cool, armored surface. Yardley 1950, 187. Their captains, such as England's Walter Hammond, risked a Bradman fixation that prevented them from seeing farther than the little man from Bowral. Edric 1959, 14. Bradman himself understood that he occupied a special place in the esteem of his fellow Australians. A courteous man, he used his habitual need for seclusion at the end of a day's play to reply to the thousands of letters he received. Yet on the field he was seen as a solitary man with a solitary aim, who was bound to have admirers rather than friends. Robertson, Glasgow, 1949-80. This, and his efforts to protect his family's privacy, bred resentment among some teammates who felt he was not truly one of them. Fingleton, commenting on Bradman as a captain, thought that he rarely bestowed praise or discussed tactics, and so his main resource as a leader was the example he set his men in concentration and the relentlessness of his attack. 1981, 125. England's Norman Yardley agreed that, off the field, Don was never a mixer, but added that as a touring captain he could be charming and a first-class after-dinner speaker. Yardley 1950, 188. Hele observed that Bradman was perhaps the most astute cricketer I ever watched or umpired for. Whitington and Hele 1974, 198. The year 1934 was particularly momentous for Bradman. His desire for an income free from the vagaries of cricket was met by Harry Hodgetts, an Adelaide stockbroker and member of the Board of Control. Under a 6-year contract, Bradman and his family would move to Adelaide for Hodgetts to induct him into stockbroking while allowing time off for cricket. Bradman's tidy mind and focus on detail would serve him well in that profession. Meanwhile, he was named vice-captain to Woodfull in the team to play for the Ashes in England in 1934. Jardine renounced any interest in the captaincy and opinion in England had turned decisively against Bodyline. Bradman performed well below expectations in the first 3 tests. Then in the fourth his affinity for Headingley asserted itself. He and Bill Ponsford seized control of the match with a partnership of 388 for the 4th wicket. Bradman scored 304, but rain delivered England a draw. Australia needed to win the final test at the Oval to reclaim the Ashes. Headingley had been no fleeting revival, as he and Ponsford again plundered the English attack in a 451-run partnership for the 2nd wicket. Bradman scored 244, and Australia won by 562 runs. Throughout the series, there was talk of Bradman looking unwell. He was taken dangerously ill with acute appendicitis on the eve of departing England and was operated on immediately. Jessie secured a passage on the first available ship and arrived just after her husband's discharge from hospital. They returned to Australia with medical advice for Bradman to rest. Following 3 months of his recuperation at Bowral, they finally made the move to Adelaide in April 1935. There, Bradman joined the Kensington Club and captained South Australia. Although much improved, Bradman's health precluded his joining the 1935-36 series in South Africa. Woodfull had retired, and so Vic Richardson led the Australians. In November 1936, Bradman supplanted Richardson to take on the Englishmen at home. Gubby Allen now led the visitors. Bradman, as an inexperienced leader, was sorely tested. England won the first 2 matches convincingly, with the new Australian captain twice dismissed without scoring. There were reports of dissension within the team, and opinions appeared in the press that he was ill-suited to captaincy. The former Australian player Alan Fairfax told a London newspaper that Bradman seemed too brilliantly individual. Rosenwater, 1978, 254. In a startling turnaround, Australia won the last 3 tests, with Bradman contributing scores of 270, 212, and 169. It was the first time in Ashes history that a team had won a series from 2-0 down. During the 3rd test, he signaled his emergence as a consummate tactician when he boldly responded to having to bat on a wet pitch by switching Australia's batting order, so that its best batsmen were kept away from the crease until the wicket had dried. Immediately after the 3rd test, for players, O'Reilly, Leslie Fleetwood-Smith, Stan McCabe, and Leo O'Brien were called before the Board of Control to be told of allegations of players not fully supporting Bradman, insubordination, and lack of physical fitness. O'Reilly asked if they were the subject of these claims, and, when he was assured they were not, the meeting broke up in confusion. Bradman denied any involvement, but the 4 thought otherwise and that he should have faced them at the meeting. Although Bradman and his vice-captain, McCabe, denied stories of a team rift, Bradman's relationships with Fingleton and O'Reilly remained tense. O'Reilly attributed this to the chemistry arising from our different backgrounds. Don Bradman was a teetotaler, ambitious, conservative, and meticulous. I was outspoken and gregarious, an equally ambitious young man of Irish descent. O'Reilly, 1985, 53-54. He later blamed Bradman for the omission of the spinner Clary Grimmett from the team that toured England in 1938, describing it as the most biased, ill-considered piece of selection known to Australian cricket. Pollard, 1995, 312. Sectarianism being rife in Bradman's playing era, some commentators saw significance in all 4 players, called before the board being Catholic, while Bradman was a Protestant and a Freemason. It remained the case, however, that Bradman and Fleetwood-Smith, despite being vastly different in personality, enjoyed each other's company, helped by a shared love of piano playing. Amidst Bradman's unmatched public status in Australia, there was travail in his personal life. His first child, Ross, was born in October 1936, but survived only 2 days. A second son, John, born in July 1939, was afflicted by polio at 12, but fully recovered. He chose athletics over cricket and held state and national junior hurdles records. A daughter, Shirley, born in April 1941, suffered from cerebral palsy. Bradman's fame affected every aspect of his life, Constantly being approached in public and seemingly never-ending requests to attend events were just the more obvious manifestations. The absence of a clear, separate identity for his son as he reached adulthood eventually became overwhelming, despite the strong family bond. John, a lecturer in law at the University of Adelaide, changed his surname to Bradman in 1972. This was painful for his parents. Bradman Sr. was clearly delighted when John reversed this decision towards the end of his father's life. Australia retained the Ashes on the 1938 tour, but the series was dominated by the Innings and 579-run defeat that England inflicted during the final test at the Oval, where Bradman was unable to bat after fracturing his ankle during a rare demonstration of his leg spin bowling. The match highlight was Len Hutton's score of 364, a new test record. Bradman's first-class tour average of 115.66 was his highest of all his tours of England. That great English spinner, Headley Verity, who took Bradman's wicket in Tests 8 times, more often than any other bowler, played his last Ashes Test in that match. Fighting with the British Army, Verity was killed in action in 1943. In November 1938, Bradman took up his first significant management position in the game when he became Kensington's delegate to the South Australian Cricket Association, SACA. The following year, his concern for financial security reasserted itself when he was persuaded by a Melbourne Cricket Club committee member to seek the club's secretaryship. The position would very likely have ended his international career, and instead went to Vernon Ransford, a former Test player. World War II brought a suspension of Test cricket. In early 1940, the combination of a Bradman appearance and anticipation that all domestic first-class cricket would soon cease attracted 75,765 spectators over 4 days to the SCG to watch New South Wales play South Australia, only for him to score just 39 and 40. He enrolled in the Royal Australian Air Force Reserve in June 1940, and was assessed as suitable for aircrew and training as an observer. His enlistment did not eventuate, however, and in October he was appointed as a lieutenant in the Citizen Military Forces. The next month he attended a course at the Army School of Physical and Recreational Training at Frankston, Victoria. He began full-time duty as a PRNT officer in Adelaide in January 1941, and there were reports in the press of a plan for him to be posted as a supervisor of physical training with the Australian Imperial Force overseas. To the surprise of most, a check revealed defective eyesight, and worse still, he had apparently developed fibrositis. He underwent periods of hospitalization and, to his lasting disappointment, was released from his duties and placed on the retired list in April 1941. So acute was the condition that Jesse had to shave him and comb his hair. Bradman resumed work as a stockbroker with Hodgetts, and in 1943 became a member of the Adelaide Stock Exchange. 2 years later the firm collapsed, owing a large amount of money. Bradman had trusted Hodgetts, who was found to have resorted to fraud to prop up the business. Bradman responded calmly by starting his own stockbroking firm in the same building he had worked with Hodgetts, and targeted many of his former clients. Despite the investigating process, finding nothing to taint Bradman, some members of the Adelaide business community believed that in a firm of just 5 staff, he must have had prior knowledge of Hodgetts' malfeasance. As the war approached its end, anticipation of the resumption of international cricket grew. Bradman did not play in the victory test in England. 5 matches held over May and August 1945 between servicemen from England and Australia, the success of which confirmed the public hunger for the game. In August 1945, he was elected as one of South Australia's representatives on the Board of Control. The public was more concerned, however, that his continuing health problems would prevent him from resuming playing. To conserve himself for the forthcoming Ashes series, he missed the 1946 tour of New Zealand. The English team that toured Australia in 1946 to 47 was led by Hammond, now 43. Despite lingering doubts about Bradman's fitness, he declared himself ready to play and enjoyed a triumphant return at the head of a much-changed team. The many new players included the opening batsman Arthur Morris, Don Talon, whom Bradman rated as the best wicketkeeper he ever saw, and Keith Miller and Ray Lindwall, who together spearheaded Australia's opening bowling. Critics insinuated that, because Bradman had not seen active service abroad, he was insensitive to the game's supposed new spirit built on a shared experience of war. His refusal to walk during the first test in Brisbane, when the Englishman claimed he had clearly been caught in the slips, drew intense criticism. He was then on 28, and the umpire quickly turned down the appeal. Bradman believed he had hit the ball into the ground, with a visibly angry Hammond remarking to him, "A fine way to start a bloody series, Perry 2014 for 174. This incident was cited for years to come as the epitome of Bradman's determination to win. He went on to score 187, demoralizing the Englishman, who rightly feared yet another Bradman-dominated series. The second test in Sydney saw Bradman and Sid Barnes share a first-class record partnership of 405 for the fifth wicket, each scoring 234. Australia retained the Ashes 3-0. Bradman had made a remarkable return. He declared himself available in 1947-48 for India's first tour of Australia, without mentioning whether he would also lead Australia in England in 1948. For him, the most significant event of the Indian tour was that in a match for an Australian 11 against the tourists in Sydney, he scored his century of centuries in first-class cricket, making 172 runs in 177 minutes. During the fourth test against India, he announced his availability to tour England, but also that he would retire afterwards. Although reluctant to lead another demanding tour, he felt a continuing responsibility to his team and to Ashes cricket. The tour was welcomed in England as affirmation of a return to normality after 6 long years of war. The Invincibles, as the 1948 Australians came to be known, occupy a special place in the game's history. They fulfilled their captain's intention of not losing a match on the entire tour, defeated England in the Test 4-0, and provided a triumphant conclusion to Bradman's international career. His contributions included 138 in the first test at Nottingham and 173 not out in the fourth, during which, on a Warren Headingley pitch, he and Morris put on 301 for the second wicket, while his team snared an unexpected win by scoring over 400 runs on the last day. Although the aggressive fast bowling of Lindwall and Miller was a major contribution to Australia's success, Miller wanted greater latitude to perform as a batsman. His captain, however, reasoned that the team already had enough top-class batsmen, and so used him primarily as a bowler. Miller also disliked Bradman's incessant will to win, even when playing hapless English county sides, particularly so closely following a war in which, he recollected, a lot of Test cricketers and future Test cricketers had been killed. Butler, 1979-54. Bradman's most memorable innings on the 1948 tour was his short stay at the crease during the final test at the Oval. Having received a tumultuous welcome from the crowd and 3 cheers from the English players, he was bowled second ball for a duck by Eric Hollies. He had needed only 4 runs to finish his career, with a test average of 100. For years afterwards, Morris would cheekily point out that he was Bradman's batting partner at the time and had gone on to score 196. After this game, Bradman hit consecutive centuries in his last 3 first-class innings in England. In January 1949, Bradman was knighted. 30 years later, he would be appointed AC. A testimonial match was held for him in Melbourne in December 1948, and in February 1949, the Kippax Oldfield testimonial match marked his final appearance at Sydney. In March, he played his last first-class match, a Sheffield Shield game in Adelaide against Victoria. He scored 30 in his only innings, and his playing career concluded with his being helped off the field after spraining an ankle. In a game often buried in a plethora of statistics, one stands out as testifying to Bradman's dominance. His final test batting average of 99.94. At the time of his retirement, the next highest average by a player of 20 tests or more was that of George Headley of the West Indies, 60.83. The 29 centuries Bradman scored in 52 tests include 10 double centuries and 2 triple centuries. In all first-class games, over a third of his innings resulted in centuries. Attempts to explain the source of such skill have not led to any consensus. They include his childhood practice against the tank stand, ability to learn, fierce concentration, keen eyesight, physical strength, calm temperament, ambition, strong defense, and even small feet that supposedly aided his footwork. England's Dennis Compton thought Bradman had a marvelous gift of getting into position quicker than any batsman I have ever seen, with brain and body in perfect harmony, 1980-32. Fingleton also attributed much to Bradman's cool, calm, and analytical mind. As great a taskmaster of the body as man could possess, 1949, 201.